Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushal Mehra. All right. Today's discussion is called Wokeism in Sports. And to discuss that, I have with me Shambhav Sharma and Nikhil Mehra. Nikhil को अभी नए अवतार में आप आज देख रहे हो. निखिल नॉर्मली लॉयर होता है, मगर किसी को नहीं पता निखिल लॉयर से भी ज्यादा स्पोर्ट्स फैनेटिक है. So, boys, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, before we start the discussion, because everybody will everybody.
You guys generally do this thing with Abhijit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Abhijit hates sport, na?
Abhijit hates all sports.
But he loves wokeism. He would have been ideal for it.
नहीं, वो बहुत डिप्रेस करता है.
Wokeism के बारे में बात करने के लिए you need to know a little bit about certain sports. At least the sports that we'll probably talk about.
हाँ, अभिजीत को तो अच्छा किसी ने लाइव में ऑलरेडी कमेंट कर दिया है, कुशल फिर गंजा हो गया. अरे भाई, अरे क्या बाल ना काटूं.
मैच होना था ना तीनों को, इसलिए.
I did not want Nikhil and Shambhav to feel left out, so मैंने बोला मैं भी कर लेता हूँ काम.
#solidarity.
Okay. Now, before, because we titled the discussion Wokeism in Sports, it is only fair if somebody comes back to us and says, Bhaiya, nowadays everybody keeps dropping this word wokeism. So first define. So I'm just going to lay out a basic boundary definition and then I will request Nikhil and Shambhav, if they don't agree with it, to add or give their own understanding. So for me, wokeism stems from, wokeism is what I would say in a technical term, applied postmodernism. Now, what is applied postmodernism? Applied postmodernism is a khichdi of postmodernism of the 1960s, 70s, 80s, Lyotard, Derrida, Foucault, Gayatri Spivak, etc. in the modern day world, plus critical race theory, which stems from, the Frankfurt School and all that getting mishmashed in between from the 1930s onwards. And basically, wokeism is a byproduct of that. Now, what is wokeism based on? Wokeism is based on the ideology of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. So, in my word, everything. So, there is only one objective truth in the world of wokeism, and that objective truth is oppression. Everything is looked at from the lens of oppression. Now, so what I say when I use the word wokeism in sports, it is specifically from the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, and how it has become some sort of a religion where everything becomes about diversity, equity, inclusion. So before we get into anything else, Nikhil and Sham, do you have a problem with this explanation of wokeism? And if you want, you can add.
Nikhil, go ahead.
It just went way over me, man. I don't even know what to say. Derrida, Spivak, slow down. You keep doing this, I would have started throwing section numbers at you, and good luck.
मैं वही सोच रहा था कि ये जब भी इस तरह का नाम फेंकता है ना, एक सेक्शन नंबर डाल दो.
Yeah, let's keep it easy, I guess. I mean, people are seeing certain symbols being used in the sports field that they haven't seen until the BLM movement arose, and I think this is what we're really talking about, right? I mean, so I understand that you want to talk about the narrative, underlying narrative being one of oppression, but sports fans don't and should not have to understand things to that degree. For them it's a simpler thing. It's just, you switch on the television and there's this particular symbol being exercised by everyone, and how do they react to it, and how do they feel about it?
Yeah, I do think that's fair. I also think it's fair that people should sort of understand where this sudden wave, people seem to think it's this sudden wave of wokeism that's just appeared out of nowhere, and it's taken over colleges and it's taken over institutions, corporations, and sports. And I do think it's important to understand कि ये आ किधर से रहा है. Like, where is it coming from? What is there? Has it come out of nowhere? Is there a precursor to it? And when you start looking into it, like Kushal said, there is a long precursor to it. It's been cooking for a while. It's been in the works for a long time. It's appeared in various forms in the 80s and the 90s with the politically correct movement. But I do think with the proliferation of social media, it really has had a fertile ground to grow and expand like never before. And that's what we are seeing with sports now. And I'm sure Kushal has an agenda that we'll get into it one by one. But I do want to try and touch, Kushal, eventually how it's a bit of a mixture. The current wokeism in sports, or the current level of wokeism in sports, I kind of feel like it's a mixture between corporations knowing exactly who their audience is and corporations being dominated by sort of more left-leaning employees. So I'm sure we'll get into it.
Okay, so let's start with, I know Sham, you hate cricket,
Yes, I
but
do.
as we are an Indian podcast, tu bhul gaya, tu bhi hai Indian. So we have to start with the current state of affairs when it comes to. So in case if you are living under a well and you don't know what has happened and what has uh, basically taken over the entire discussion as far as I'm concerned. And the irony is both Nikhil and I don't even watch T20 cricket. मगर हम लोग मुझे लगता है ये वर्ल्ड कप सिर्फ फ्रस्ट्रेशन से देख रहे हैं कि ये नील क्यों कर रहे हैं.
Exactly same. I have no idea about what the hell's happening in cricket. I just went on Twitter और मैंने देखा कि ये लोग साले घुटने टेक रहे हैं. That's what made me actually pay attention to cricket. So I guess they succeeded in their objective.
I still haven't watched much of it. I only watched a bit of New Zealand's batting yesterday just to see whether our bowlers would react. And how our captaincy would react, and it was pretty tame. It was very tame. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, so let's start with this. And Nikhil and I were having actually a very long conversation about this on the phone a few days ago. So Nikhil, मैंने जब तेरे को, so I'm going to draw two parallels right over here. Now, the first one is what is happening right now, where during the first match, I don't know whether they kneel down in the second game or not. So I'm not going to comment on that. There is no evidence that the Indian team was kneeling down in the second game. But what we know as of now is that the first game, the Indian team was kneeling down in support to Black Lives Matter, and that led to an excessive response. Excessive and the word excessive is here used in a neutral way, not in a good or bad way. It was an outpouring of outrage of both kinds in support of them and against them on social media. And here's my point. Now, I personally have a deep problem with this. I'll explain why I have a problem with this, and why we are having this discussion today is that I might be in a situation where I might disagree on some points with you guys also, and I'm going to explain why. Now, my first problem with this is that Black Lives Matter, according to me, is not a thing that is very inherent to India. मतलब मुझे नहीं समझ पड़ रहा है हम लोग बाहर की चीज यहाँ क्यों ला रहे हैं. I mean, हमारे देश में काफी issues होते हैं जो हम जिससे deal कर सकते हैं. And secondly, I just want to show you guys a blast from the past. This is an old news from the past. So this is what had happened. ICC had asked Dhoni to remove the army insignia from gloves, and fans were rooting for him. Basically, this was during the World Cup. I don't know if you guys remember. This was the Balidan badge, or the army insignia was spotted on Dhoni's gloves as television replays showed him stumping Feflukwayo in the 40th over of the innings bowled by Chahal in the match against South Africa. Now, this was considered not okay by the ICC at that time. He was just putting an insignia on his glove. It was pretty, insignificant if you ask me.
It's fairly tame,
Yeah, it's fairly tame. But now I want both of you to opine on this. These are two contrasting issues where ICC disapproves one and then tells you to kneel down to BLM. Now, I personally...
and not just that, Kushal, sorry to interject, but not just that. It's also, the BCCI seems to be generally quite fine with Pakistani cricketers standing in the middle of the pitch and praying, which is an explicit expression of religion in sports, which one would think ki bhai, if the Indian players started doing an aarti in the middle of the ground, I can imagine some people having a problem with that. And I can also imagine thinking to myself ki yaar, what's the need for that in sport? Cricket pitch pe jaake aarti kyun kar rahe ho? Ghar mein karo. But the BCCI or the ICC rather doesn't seem to have a problem with religion in sports, but they seem to have a problem with one tiny little emblem of the army on a goalkeeper's or a wicket keeper's gloves.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So Nikhil, what's your view on this?
There's no view. First, we need to structure this a little bit. Look, all sport, the way it's organized, particularly cricket in particular, I can tell you about, they tend to raise an issue about any political interference into sport. Not saying the army is politics, but any political interference into sport. So, for example, at various times in the last 2 decades, Zimbabwe has been ousted from the ICC because their government took over their board. Right?
Yeah.
So the idea was always that political interference can't enter into the cricketing field. And this is actually true of a number of other sports. Now, you recently have had the takeover of English football by sovereign wealth funds, right? And so that's really the big issue in there is really whitewashing those human rights violating regimes by allowing them to purchase football clubs, right? And again, it's really what it is the violation of that barrier between politics and sport. You always keep it out, right? So the fear now with BLM, not BLM, but with any sort of political symbolism that you consistently bring out onto the sports field, is if it's sauce for the goose, it's sauce for the gander, right? So if one symbol can work for you, then another symbol can work for someone else, and then where does sport eventually go? Because then another group will turn around and say, look, why can't we have our own separate cricket team? Or why can't we have representing a nation? Because we are as a representative of the nation. You've allowed all of this politics into the sporting arena. So now you create a structural problem. So that's really the foundational basis of how politics is always kept out of sport. Because, you may have 2 warring factions within a country. Right? Yeah. And they want to send 2 separate teams. What does the international body do? It can either reject both, or it'll have to turn around and say, well, we have one on board and that's the one we're going with, right?
Yeah.
The hell with everything else, right? They don't want to get into all of this. And that was a good, wise thing to do. But if you're introducing politics by this route, tomorrow you have today an issue where, at least in America, as I understand it, there's unanimity on the issue of combating racism. There may not be unanimity on the validity of all the claims of BLM. There may not be unanimity on how to approach this, but there is that base level symbolism of racism has to be combated exists, right? So it's an easy issue to that degree only. To that degree only. And when Colin Kaepernick happened, that was an American issue, right? That was an issue pertaining only to him bending the knee saying, we're not fully free in this country. That was his symbolism, right? That's why I'm not standing up. We're not fully free in this country. But when BLM erupted, and there's a point that Sham made at the start here, that everything tends to become an international issue now because of social media, right? So in any event, the link between America and the UK is very strong, always has been very strong politically, culturally. But it spreads faster and further than that, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at European football, very quickly, a number of the teams started taking the knee, but a lot of teams don't.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of teams don't, because in certain parts of Europe, they're like, what the heck is this?
Yeah, I think in like mainland Europe, I hardly think a lot of teams take the knee now.
The further east you go, the more it starts happening, where they're like, the hell with all of you. Right? We are moving towards egalitarian societies. We built the most egalitarian societies in human history. And you're talking about us being constant oppressors by invoking stuff from centuries back.
Yeah.
And really now wanting to use it as an excuse to undo the oppression, no, to go beyond and become the oppressor. Right? So that's the sort of argument that sort of gets into, but be that as it may. So one of the things is always keep the politics out of the sports. And it kept things clean because it keeps it clean for the viewer, it keeps it clean for the player. The player doesn't have to carry the burden of politics into the field. But, how far can you keep politics out? Because, as an example, South Africa's quota culture. So I don't know, Sham, if you're aware of this, but the South African cricket team has racial quotas. Those quotas have to be fulfilled. And what that's led to is a large number of exceptionally talented white South Africans have moved out and have played for England, played for New Zealand, and played for Australia, etc.
Does rugby have it too, or is it just cricket?
All their sports have it. All their sports have it.
अभी नमीबिया में भी बहुत सारे साउथ अफ्रीकन जा रहे हैं ना?
Wherever they can get to play, at the end of the day, you've shut down, right? You've shut down the route altogether. So but that is considered an aspect not of politics interfering into the functioning of the board, the South African board, but as a matter of domestic law. So tomorrow, if Indian law said Article 14, Article 15, Article 16 reservations have to be extended to all private bodies as well, and this is an issue that's been raised politically in the context of hiring, etc., then there is no reason to believe it will not infiltrate your sports teams as well. And if it infiltrates your sports teams, then that's not a political issue, right? So it's a slightly complex thing.
Now here's the thing, why is it complex? Okay, so I also want to analyze this in another way. You said we should leave politics out of sport, and that's been the standard protocol. Now in the case of NFL, it was slightly different, because I have never understood, in America, it's very interesting. At least Sham and I watch combat sports. So one of the sponsors of UFC is the American Army. I don't know if Sham, you have noticed this. Every time that lady comes up and you have that ad, of the American Army all the time. You have seen NFL, you will see the American Army sponsoring on all major Super Bowl. Super Bowl pe to karte hain, all major weekend sports pe American Army does. So is that politicizing sport? And another very interesting thing that I've noticed is NFL, NBA, these are all private organizations. But at least in NFL, I don't know about Major League Baseball. I've noticed this in NFL, they play the national anthem there. And it was at that time that Colin Kaepernick, by the way, refused. Basically, he did not stand up. He was kneeling down. And his whole thing was police brutality and all of that. And I think it was in relation to George Floyd, or maybe it happened just before George Floyd.
It was before. It was 2 or 3 years before Floyd. Yeah.
Well before. George Floyd is
that was the whole point.
In that sense, right? I mean, there's no dearth of police excess against African Americans in the United States. It happens every year, so there's always an incident.
Yeah, and again, with the proliferation of social media, it's become a lot easier to capture these moments than it used to be. Let's say, the Rodney King in the 90s was such a unicorn of an event that somebody was able to actually film it. But now everybody has a phone. There's some shit's going down. That at least since 2014, 2013 onwards, somebody or the other has a phone and they're going to film it. So the more incidents like these started coming to light, and that sort of culminated then in Colin Kaepernick taking the knee and, BLM sort of becoming a thing.
No, so that was not my point, Sham. So first I'll come to you. My point is something different. See, everything in life, when it comes to narratives, there are certain things that we take for granted. I'm just being very honest here. This is my view. You don't have to agree, nor does Nikhil have to agree. This whole thing about, the national anthem should be played, and that's the unifying thing, and, it is sacrosanct. These are all a priori assumptions that people make, and they have come over years of the societal agreement. Now, what has happened here is that the reason it was jarring was there was a national agreement, whether it's in America or in India, that national anthem aata hai, tum khade hoge. That खड़े हो गए, या जो भी आपके देश का तरीका होगा उसका आदर करने का, whatever way you respect the national anthem. Now, is it a case, at least in American society, that the consensus has broken? And when the consensus has broken, there is a new consensus that is being tried to be pushed. The previous consensus was that of patriotism. The new consensus is that of diversity, equity, inclusion. And there is resistance now, and we are going through a phase where one or the other is going to win. Now, in the case of India, why the Indian cricket team looked idiotic was that the Indian cricket team has enough local issues to outrage about, right? The Indian cricket team could have taken the knee for casteism in India. The Indian cricket team could have taken the knee for jihadism in India. The Indian cricket team could take a knee for misogyny in India. But no, they take a knee for the most useless issue that could have ever come in the eyes of the... I mean, just imagine an average kid in India. It's like, ye jhuk kyun rahe hain?
Yeah.
BLM kya hai? Babaji's life matters.
Imagine if American athletes start taking the knees for, the pendency in Indian courts. It makes no sense. Abhe, hamara kya lena dena usse, bhai? It's kind of like that.
This is why, and that's a very, very important and yet obvious point, and that's why it's sort of, I had said this on Twitter, that to me, the cosmetic nature of the sentiment behind their action became apparent by the fact that they blindly did this, right? I mean, it's just a copying of everyone else doing it. They're all watching Man United and other teams do it in the Premier League. So like, hum bhi karenge. Kar lo bhaiya, karna hai, kar lo. So that just makes it cosmetic. And I don't know whether this is entirely coincidental, and I don't know if there's any way to affirm it, but that was a day before or day after or the day off. A day off or either the day off or the day before the auctions for the next two IPL teams were being conducted. And one of the bidders...
There is no coincidence, Nikhil.
Yeah. One of the bidders were the Glazers. And the Glazers, obviously...
Oh, wow.
Big sports owning team, right? So they own Man United, they own Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
They own other franchises as well.
Yeah.
And they lost the bid. Had they won the bid, this would have been a fantastic introduction straight into the American market.
Yeah.
So I don't know. With the kind of people that we have in charge, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the kind of base level thinking that's existed, and it's pathetic, but it may well be the case.
It is.
It is the case. A lot of things we think, we tend to think, or a lot of people at least tend to think that ye jo symbolic gestures hote hain, it is just it's like an ideology. It just has an ideological basis behind it, and that's 100% certainly true. But that's not the only reason. There are other corporate-minded reasons that you would do something like this as well. Like you take the Nike ads, for example, the Nike Colin Kaepernick ad, or the Nike ad for believe in something even if it means losing everything, and it pissed a lot of people off. A lot of people were like, main nahi kharidunga Nike, main nahi jaunga idhar, main nahi karunga ye. But Nike at the end of the day also knows its audience. It's about corporations or companies or organizations knowing who their audience is and knowing where the money is coming from. And so
You hit an excellent point. This is a point that I love raising, and this is my critique essentially of wokeism.
Yeah.
As people call wokeism. To me, this is really like the ultimate ode to capitalism, in the sense that capitalism has capitalized the greatest anti-capitalistic sentiments. It's just taken them and said, we're going to show you how to make money out of this shit too bad. And there is a packaging around it. There is a way of projecting it. There is a way of putting it across. And that's a certain demographic that you go and chase. And then there is confused messaging to go and chase the other natural demographic that you in any event have. So to me, this is, you're right. There are people for whom this is a matter of ideology. There are so many for whom it's a matter of functionality. Yeah. Right? Just basic functionality. Quentin de Kock, poor guy. All he did. So the problem with all of this is, if this was ideology, it had to by definition be voluntary. Right? And the moment you decide that I don't want to take the knee, when did it transpire to the point where taking the knee is a statement against racism, but not taking it makes you all the way out to racist? Yeah. It's insane. So this is where these symbols are very dangerous. I mean, this is seeking conformed behavior, and that for me is really, really problematic. I mean, once this starts filtering down, then it's almost like your sports teams have to have a particular check-in ideology. Yeah. Right? And if you don't have that ideology at the time of checking in, you don't get in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky situation for a lot of these sports franchises, sports teams in general to be in, because like I was making the point earlier with these companies, like take Nike, for example. Nike knows Nike is not just doing this stuff because they're ideologically motivated. They're not that stupid to just work on ideological motivation. Nike knows exactly who its audience is, right? They know for a fact that it's not these backwoods redneck Republicans who are going out and buying their Air Jordan shoes. They know exactly who is buying their Air Jordan shoes.
And they know buying at least 1 or 2 pairs a year. Not like the recurring purchases.
Yeah, and they're recurring customers and they're high value customers. So they know कि भैया market किसको करना है, target किसको करना है. ठीक है, a few Republicans will get upset, but क्या करोगे? Nike छोड़ के you'll go buy New Balance. Nike छोड़ के तुम साले बाटा खरीदोगे? Where are you going to go from Nike? It's like if Apple goes woke, what are you going to do? Are you going to go then buy like a Nokia phone? No, you're not. You're still going to buy Apple because that's the good phone. So companies to an extent also know that they have a bit of a captive market. And then they also know कि भाई ये woke वगैरह ideology में indulge करके they're able to gain a certain amount of like social favor. They're also able to curry a certain amount of political favor. And I want to ask what you think of this, Kushal, because you know when it comes to, at least in the American context, when it comes to Republicans, they're all about like not interfering in how companies work, not interfering in private enterprise unless it's for a specific religious reason, like abortion and things like that. But generally speaking, Republicans are all about कि नहीं हम interfere नहीं करेंगे, तुमको जो करना है करो. Democrats are the ones that are more all about, we want to interfere in how these businesses run. The business should be run this way. There needs to be more government control over how businesses are run. And these companies know that if we curry favor with the Democrats, then if the Democrats ever come to power and they know that we are compliant, they won't go after us that hard. So do you think that also plays a role in the thinking of how these companies operate?
I think there are multiple layers to this thing. I think the primary thinking is, like, again, Nikhil and I have had offline discussions about woke capitalism. About there's so many times, and this is just the market playing out today. The market somehow seems to have a demand, and always remember, Sham, America has a disproportionately larger influence on the culture of the world, and especially in a world that we're living in, this is going to happen. But I want to make 2 points here, and I hope that one of you would have taken my bait, but I'll take it up myself and I will bait people. No, I want to raise this question. Whether you're kneeling down or you're standing up for a national anthem, this is all symbolism. Now, the point is which symbolism is fine and which isn't.
Yeah.
I see a wry smile on Nikhil's face.
I did take your bait. This is what I was pointing out with De Kock, right? So if he doesn't take it, does he suddenly become racist?
So that's my whole point. But when somebody kneels down to a national anthem, does he become anti-national?
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I'm totally with you on this. I found, for example, even that Supreme Court order that the national anthem must play before every movie in the cinema. What is this here?
Yeah, I don't think that's a silly order, in my opinion. I think people might get pissed off, but like, I'm not going to the movies for national anthem, yeah.
Look, at the end of the day, all of the parallels to these things are you have a structure, right? So sports has a particular structure. If there is a governing body, if there is a sport owning team or a manager or owner or whatever, and is compelling this kind of behavior, then you're taking that choice out of the equation altogether. It's the same thing in a theater, right? So if by law it's compelled upon you, and these are ideologies that are being compelled upon you. I may, on a particular day, be feeling that, for me, the national anthem thing was just, you're compelling this national anthem in an environment where people are utterly at ease and rest.
Yeah.
And, this is going to lead to unnecessary situation of disrespect towards the anthem.
Yeah,
really never ever happened.
And context matter करता ना यार. अगर World Cup हो रहा है, तो of course it makes a ton of sense. Play it. ICC Champions Trophy हो रही है, play it. It makes a ton of sense. But ये साला मोहन बगान versus East Bengal में बजाने की क्या जरूरत है?
Exactly. And
so
but today what are we left with? We are left with this entire symbolism thing is today one symbol only, right? It's just the one bended knee in favor of BLM. It could be bended knee with the fist raised or without the fist raised.
Yeah.
But it's just that right now. How do we see this going forward? Are there going to be more symbols that come in? So tomorrow, for example, if the Pakistan team, because I'll give you an example about all of this. You are not, even if you're a fan entering into a stadium, particularly in cricket matches, allowed certain kinds of banners and slogans. You're not allowed them.
Yeah.
You can't you can't have political slogans. You can't have slogans about Kashmir in an India-Pak match, for example.
Yeah.
Afghans can't have slogans about Pakistanis, for example, right? You're not allowed these. But what if it's a very easy, logical argument to make, right? So you support BLM, great. What are the Pakistanis who turn around and say, oh, the poor Kashmiris, look at the way they're oppressed. We can have a symbol for them as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And let's assume it's a highly Islamized symbol. Right? So it creates new layers to it. So for me, it's a very easy debate in America while it pertains only to racism and
Brilliant
racism
point.
in a generic sense. But once you open this door, where do you go next, right? So that this is where I think the danger lies, and this is independent of the fact that to the viewer, who when they're engaging with this issue, they don't get to be as blasé about the issue as athletes do by simply showing a symbol,
Yeah.
right? To the viewer, to many viewers, these issues are layered, they're highly debated, they affect their lives in different ways, they're affecting their behavior in different ways, and it can cause consternation to them that you are presenting this as if it's a singular light,
Yeah.
right? It's very easy for a lot of white people in America to assume this is anti-us, right? Whether it's misguided that way or not, but it's very easy to assume that, right?
Yeah.
So if a Kashmir kind of symbol came up from the Pakistan team before they play, right? It's very easy for all Indians and all Hindus to assume this is anti-us, right? In which case, where's the sport left? So you've broken that original thing that I told you about, which is you keep politics out of sports.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sham, this is a brilliant question that a viewer has asked. Somebody has asked, doesn't the Indian team bending the knee to basically, in a way, suggest that we are bending the knee to the Western world, and we are accepting that we are historical oppressors of black people, just like the white people are bending it for. I mean, why are we bending otherwise?
Yeah.
It's a good question. This guy has asked a very good question.
Yeah. No, that is a very good question. And it raises a point कि भाई इसका कोई cultural या political significance है India में? Does it have any kind of significance in India? Like if you're bending the knee for casteism, maybe I don't like the fact that you're doing it, but at least it's relevant to the bloody Indian context. I think that's the big reason why
Somebody
it's
has
pissed so
made
many
a very
people off
nice,
as well.
comment, tongue-in-cheek comment. So somebody has said, so was the Indian cricket team standing up for the rights of the
saw
Sindhis?
that.
That would have at least made sense in the Indian context.
Yeah, I
It's
saw
so
that.
true. I mean, what are we
Read
bending the knee
Vivek
from? I
Sinha's
mean,
comment. Vivek Sinha has an interesting question too.
yeah, so that's the whole point, right? I mean, so okay, so let's take this one. If the Indian team would have taken the knee for, let's say, an Indian issue, won't it be too considered as wokeism? What do you think, Nikhil? If not, then how?
No, wait, wokeism again. So I'm not a really big fan of that phrase per se in this context. You know, whether it's wokeism, not wokeism. I think by what you mean by wokeism is the sort of the infiltration, as that's how I'm projecting it, of political issues into the sporting arena.
Exactly.
And
Political
using,
issues based on the diversity, equity, inclusion lens.
right, and using the sporting platform that sort of attracts more eyeballs than anything else in the world to project that issue further than what might otherwise be able to project itself, which sort of is a breach of the old rules of keep certain things out, you want to keep certain things away.
And tell me this.
So let's go back to the question that was raised, right? So the question is, would that also be called? To me, raising political issues on the sports field is an unsubtle expression of those issues first up. And unsubtle expressions of complex, layered political and sociological issues is a very dangerous step. And it is not coming across this argument perfectly well today because, like I said, it's very easy to oppose racism in a generic sense. It's impossible to say no to it.
Yeah.
But sport then is trying to sort of, you have, let me put it this way to you. In America today, there are certain states which, shockingly to me, are willing to name parents as domestic terrorists if they are haranguing and constantly questioning school boards and school teachers and school staff about critical race theory that's being fed to their kids, or about excessive sexualized content that's being fed to very young kids in the name of sensitivity towards LGBTQIA, right? Yeah. They're being called domestic. So if that parent who's opposed critical race theory on this and been called a domestic terrorist sees that bended knee, right, I think it makes them feel more aggressive, right? So to answer the question, I don't know if it's called wokeism or not called wokeism, but I don't like this one-size-fits-all symbolic gestured approach to what may be layered and more complex issues. Because it looks clean right now, because it looks like just say no to racism. But you never know how that turns out once these issues become more complicated.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. In the 2018 World Cup, there was a game between Switzerland and Serbia. And in that game, Switzerland had two players, Granit Xhaka and the fucking tiny guy. I forgot what his name was. But those two players are of... Shaqiri, that's the guy. Yeah, Shaqiri.
Shaqiri is Albanian origin.
Yeah, him and Xhaka both. Him and Xhaka both are of Albanian descent. So I think Switzerland won the match 2-1.
He got banned for his celebration.
So Switzerland won the match 2-1. And Shaqiri scored the winning goal. And after the winning goal, Shaqiri and Xhaka both ran off to the audience and did this symbol, which is basically the symbol of Albania, the Albanian
Macedonia, the soaring eagle, the Macedonian symbol.
So it was the soaring eagle symbol, and what happened as a result, and it was basically in response to the atrocities that they believe that the Serbians committed against the Albanian Muslims during the war. And as a result of that, both of those players got a multi-match ban. They got a huge fine. Now imagine if instead of doing the soaring eagle sign, they've taken the knee for BLM, would they have been banned for 6 games? Would they have had 200,000 pounds put on them as a fine? So the point that Nikhil is raising, ki bhai, once you open the door, where do you stop? Why do you just stop at BLM? Like, are you not allowed to go?
First of all, on BLM, did you guys look at this recent poll? Now, at least inside adults in America, there is a 1% increase. More people oppose BLM than support it now.
Yeah. By the way, you look at the
graph is incredible. Look at around that November 20 mark. Look at how high up it was. Yeah. Election time ke liye tha, ho gaya. I think this was also almost feels like the replica was with the farmers' protest as well. A few elections coming up, we can jack this up, get this moving upwards. I mean, I'm telling you, this is all capitalism. Marketers today are more advertisers. Marketers are about as important as message makers as anyone else out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Basically, Civics has been tracking public opinion on the activist group every week since 2017, interviewing a total of 278,076 adults across the country. For most of that period, BLM has enjoyed majority support. It reached peak popularity 53% immediately after the killing of George Floyd in June 2020, but has been drifting downwards ever since. Crossover was reached this week with 44% of American public opposed to BLM and 43% in favor. Because now, Nikhil, isn't our BCCI beautiful? हमारा मतलब हम लोग अमेजिंग है. जब एक चीज का नेचुरल डिक्लाइन शुरू हो जाता है, बीसीसीआई बोलती है ना असी करना है. Now we will get into the game.
यार मेरे हिसाब से बीसीसीआई और इंडियन टीम की मेरे को असल प्रॉब्लम है, they are so insincere in what they've done, right? In real sense, they haven't actually even done it, as far as I'm concerned.
You know what it reminds me of? That whole episode.
So clueless about what they've done, how they're doing it, what they're doing.
You know what it reminded me of? That whole taking the knee episode. Kushal and Nikhil, you've both probably seen that clip. You've seen that clip where there's a Sapa party worker or a Congress worker जो बापू के बर्थडे पे जाके बापू के स्टैचू के सामने रोता है, क्या चले गए बापू, हमको छोड़ के, बापू क्यों चले गए? अबे साले 75 साल हो गए, तू अभी रो रहा है हरामजादे. It's like that. That's what it reminded me of.
I found the Indian, like my entire tweet series and that was just, they're so insincere that in my view they've done nothing at all. People
Nikhil, is this wokeism? Then tell me. This is Enes Kanter wearing a custom-made Free Tibet shoe designed by Barriosao, and he's an NBA player too.
All I'll tell you is the Chinese own the NBA, and this guy is not going to be around for too long.
Yes.
End of story.
Yes. That was going to be my question to the both of you now. Okay, in this whole wokeism in sports, where the hell does China feature? Like, how are these woke athletes, completely silent on China, but they'll speak on every other bloody issue under the sun? Is this not basically is this not an indication? If this is not an indication of like corporate wokeism, I don't know what's an indication of corporate wokeism.
Yeah, boss. China features as the chittar in the piece, boss. To mess around, the padegi zone. That's all it is. China is always exactly that role in every aspect of life. They are the chittar in the room. So you will get it if you mess around with them. It's an end of story, dude.
Yeah.
No, but this is again, it all boils down to the hypocrisy of this entire movement, and this entire the right word would be the concept creep into sport in general. It is based on a power play where the Houston Rockets, when somebody from their side had spoken about it, they had to, because China took all their merch out of every single store in China, they had to bend. Now this new guy is raising the free to bet, and by the way, ये तो बंद ही नहीं कर रहा है. इसने वो फ्री टू बेट किया, उसके बाद ही मेड अ वीडियो ऑन उइगर मुस्लिम्स. He's like, तुम लोग उनके बारे में क्या कर रहे हो? And ये तो मतलब he's like, मैं तो जाना है, मैं 4-5 को लेके जाऊंगा अपने साथ. So he's not taking. But somebody again has asked a beautiful question. Nikhil, I'll come to you first. A very good question. Would you call Muhammad Ali's refusal to fight in Vietnam wokeism? He paid a price. A lot of today's athletes, including Cape, took inspiration from him.
How is that a parallel? Not fighting in a war, or avoiding the draft as a conscientious objector is fundamentally different from him refusing to box. I mean, how is that? You know, again, this word wokeism agitates people, and I don't want to use it. My whole point was as you call the concept creep of political or sociological issues into sport. This is not that. This is coincidental that he happens to be a major athlete. But this is really about conscientious objector under the First Amendment qua the mandatory draft.
Yeah. And it's the point that Kushal was raising again just then.
You know what I love about Kushal is he calls all of them beautiful questions. And they get shot down.
It's a good question. I believe it's all symbolism.
As analysts over here is that our filter has gone broke.
No, but it does go back to the point that Kushal was raising, that right. You know, you have
it's all symbolism.
It's all symbolism, because at the end of the day, you have somebody like a Colin Kaepernick who takes the knee, and as a result of taking the knee, as a result of sort of becoming the face of this taking the knee movement, he gets this multi-million-dollar contract with Nike. He's now is celebrated sort of almost like a filmmaker. He's got this big documentary with Anna DuVernay on Netflix now, which is premiering in every single major film festival that you can think of.
And he got a $10 million, less than $10 million settlement from NFL.
And compare that to somebody like Enes Kanter. Enes Kanter ko kya koi dega is tarah ka multi-million-dollar deal? Is somebody going to make a movie about how brave Enes Kanter is raising voice for Uyghur Muslims?
The theory with Enes Kanter is the chittar theory. He's messed with the wrong people. You don't mess with China. It's about power.
Yeah.
They are the chittar in the room.
Power? Then you should be even more mad at the Indian team, because 95% of cricket revenue comes from India.
That's why people are mad.
I want to raise something qua Kaepernick, right? With Kaepernick, what happens? Do you think it was right for him to be omitted from the squad because he took the knee? Right, that's the origin point.
So when you say right, as in what is your sense of right, or in what sense was it right?
So I always use that same framework, right? For me, it is about the political statement entering into the domain of sport, right? And hard as it may sound, wrong as it may sound to a lot of people, he may be a hero in the eyes of many, and I accept that. I get why he would be a hero in the eyes of many, right? For having shown a light from a platform from which a light couldn't have been shown otherwise. But was the organization wrong in saying, don't breach this barrier? We don't want these political symbols entering. Right? Without going into the merits, is America like this or is America not like this?
No, I don't think so. It was wrong because it's very simple. The the moment I remember reading articles from that time, the moment he started taking the knee, the ratings of NFL started tanking, because people forget that when it comes to sport, only the minority that believes in this, haath upar karo, piche dalo, aage dalo, jo bhi. No, people just watch sport for entertainment, and they don't want to be preached when they watch sport, which is now, in fact, I'm going to talk about that and it's a good segue too. So my whole bit is that now what I have decided is, how do I watch sport? Whether it's UFC, whether it's anything else, I don't watch anything, pre or post match. I literally don't do that now, because pre and post match is where all the pravachans come. I just want to see the game. And what has happened with it used to be, national anthem bajaya, sab log khush hue, aage badho life mein. I to used to find that also, kyo kar raha hai, mujhe nahi malum, magar theek hai. But that's my personal thing. My whole point to answer to you is, I think the franchises took a call that, look, this guy is going to cause us bad business and he's going to make us lose money. And for that one person, many others are going to lose money. So I think it was a perfectly legitimate business decision. I don't know about you. What do you think, Sham?
I mean, it's funny because we're talking about this now, but Bill Burr had a segment on Conan OBrien's show. And this was back in the day. This was like 2013, 2014 or something like that, where he was talking about like how he doesn't like these kinds of things in sports. And people are like, why you don't, he was talking about, he wasn't talking about BLM and all that, because I don't think that was a thing back then, but he's talking about all these people, when they talk about like Cancer Awareness Month and all this kind of stuff, and they'll suddenly, you have all these football players wearing pink helmets and pink gloves, and they're running onto the pitch and they're holding out this banner before the game, and right in the middle of the game, while I'm enjoying the game, there's this ad that, oh my God, look at this sick child, and then you have to watch this ad for 2.5 minutes about this sick child who's dying, and if you don't pay money, then this child is going to die and it's your fault. And he's like, bro, I'm tired after a long day. I just want to watch this game and fucking escape. Can I just
I remember
escape?
that.
Yeah, I just want to escape for 2 hours.
That's a killer. Bill Burr does great ranks.
If you want to watch it, go on Conan OBrien's channel and type Bill Burr, Conan OBrien Sports, and you'll find it. And he's just like, dude, it's just an escape. And I feel like so many people feel that way, that sports is an escape. It's, for me, 100%. Sports is an escape. It's just a shame that the team that I support absolutely sucks balls, but it's still an escape for me, So I think that's how a lot of people feel, and I think that's why you're seeing the viewership numbers decline as well.
I don't know, Sham, if you saw this response by Dana. So, Nikhil, I want you to listen to this, and I'll give you a background about what is happening here, Nikhil.
Yeah, I did see that.
So this is something called the Dana White Contender Series, Nikhil, where budding fighters come every Tuesday and they do fights, and Dana White then gives them a contract. Some of them get a contract for UFC in the main show, which happens on the weekend. Now, in this, what had happened was there was a particular fighter who called the other fighter a terrorist. Being very open, that's what had happened. And then somebody in the media asked Dana this question, and this is how Dana responded.
When you found out about the face-off yesterday, the terrorist comment, and, I don't know if you thought about doing anything. You know what I mean? It was just, I know you say all the time is, hey, it's a fight business. People say mean things, but that one seemed maybe a little far.
You know what my answer is to that. Are we going to do anything? It got done tonight. You know what I mean? That's the beautiful thing about the sport. I say it all the time. This is not a nice sport. This is a very rough sport. We say a lot of mean things to each other, a lot of, and justice gets served at the end of the day. I mean, listen, when you have a situation like that, the best way to solve the problem is you fight, and you fight legally, and you get paid to do it, and that's what happened tonight.
Do you ever feel that there is a line, though, that you got to worry about? Like, hey, maybe that was a little too far?
No. Not in this business. I don't.
Yeah.
There's been, if you look, you can add that to the pile of some pretty nasty things that have been said in this sport, and not just this sport. Boxing, I'm sure Muay Thai, kickboxing, you name it. Mean things are said in this insanely politically correct world we're living in. This is one place that is not.
All right, Nikhil. So I know you have no clue about the fight sport in general. You don't follow it, but I know you know fighting. I mean, you watch boxing on and off. But what do you make of this response by Dana White, who's basically the boss of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, about this incident? So justice being served, Nikhil. Just for context, जिस आदमी ने दूसरे को टेररिस्ट बुलाया था, जिसको बुलाया गया था, वो अफगानी फाइटर ने ऐसी उसकी धुलाई की है केज के अंदर, ऐसी धुलाई की उसकी कि वो बड़ा पिटा है जिसने उसको टेररिस्ट बुलाया. और वो क्या हुआ, उसने उसको टेररिस्ट क्यों बुलाया, उसका भी मैं कॉन्टेक्स्ट देता हूं. सो व्हाट हैपेंड वाज, when they did the face off, right, this guy raised his hand to shake his hand. The Afghan fighter refused to shake his hand, and that's when he called him a terrorist. So that's the whole context of the whole story. Now, Nikhil, how do you deal with this issue now?
Yeah, so look, you look at various frameworks by which things get justified or get accepted, become palatable, right? So one framework for any of these symbols is free speech, which these athletes possess free speech. They, you say that they shouldn't be using this platform, like I've been saying that, you know, certain kinds of speech are kept outside of these platforms traditionally, but where else do they do it then? You know, if they do it outside, you have a problem when they come inside. If they do it inside, you have a problem when they do it out. And they're doing a straightforward, unanimous symbol, right? So that's their free speech. The counter is others have free speech too, right? The problem with this kind of symbolism, I like the approach of what happened there. You want to exercise your free speech, you get beat up in a cage. I love it. I think that's the sport. It's fine. No problem with it.
And I also think that Dana...
And no problem with the fact that when a person uses those kind of words, maybe a lot of the fans turn around and say, dude, you've got a problem. You've got a problem as a person, right? You had no business talking to him in the way in which you did. Which is again great. Everybody has to suffer consequences of their actions. It's fine. You use those words, you suffer for it. Right? The problem with what we are seeing is this is really the great counterfactual is de Kock. So if de Kock doesn't take the knee, he suddenly doesn't have that free speech.
Yeah.
Because it is absolutely evil on his part not to as if racism dies because Quentin de Kock takes the knee or survives for generations altogether because Quentin de Kock refused to take the knee. I mean, it's madness, dude. It's madness.
Yeah. And I think Dana again...
So once you go down the path of this stuff and you open the free speech barrier, it can go in either direction. Why shouldn't it be allowed to go in either direction? Why should it be only one set of symbols only? That's the question that's going to come up over time. And then you're going to ruin entire sports because somebody will come into it who will do something quote unquote bigoted. And that's when shit will hit the fan.
Yeah.
So, Sham, I just have one question for you. Actually, तेरे लिए question है. See, somehow, Sham, this never gets problematic in boxing, MMA, Muay Thai, or any combat sport. देखो याद है Kobe Covington versus Tyron.
Yeah.
Tyron kept on shouting Black Lives Matter for every question in the pre-match press conference. And Kobe was wearing a MAGA hat and saying how Donald Trump was amazing. Yeah. They both got into the cage. They beat each other up. One guy won. It ended there. Everybody moved on. Why is it that mixed martial arts and boxing is able to get away with a lot of this? Now, people need to realize that boxing is a much older sport and boxing has a serious issue with racism from its past. Mixed martial arts is literally starting like in the mid 80s and then becoming big in, you know, after the Ultimate Fighter, you know, where Forrest Griffin and who was the other guy, the first Ultimate Fighter guy, you know, they fought Stephen Bonner. And that's how, you know, MMA really took off. So MMA is still at a nascent stage. So I guess MMA gets away with anything. You look at Mike Perry dropping N-bombs. If you remember Nate Diaz after the Masvidal fight, you know, in just a casual way, Nate Diaz was dropping N-bombs. And a lot of people don't remember poor Quentin de Kock. You know, uske mummy ya papa, I think uske mummy shayad African hai aur uske papa Caucasian hai. So he's not even, you know, he's from a mixed parent background. So now, Sham, what do you think? What is so unique about MMA that it does not transfer to other sports?
I think it's the audience. I think Dana White knows also what MMA's audience is. MMA has a very specific audience, which is quite largely, you have people that are watching MMA are like blue collar workers in let's talk about the American audience. मेरे को बाहर का उतना ज़्यादा नहीं पड़ा, but at least if you look at the American audience for MMA, it's mostly largely blue collar to like middle income workers that form the major base of MMA watchers in America. And these people, are not really affected by those woke issues, or woke issues are not really as important to these people as it is to maybe NFL watchers or NBA watchers on social media. उनका audience ही बिल्कुल अलग है. इसीलिए तो आप देखो, they are only interested in seeing a good fight. That's the only interest that they have. And everything that else that happens beyond it, they don't really care about or worry about that much. That's why you can see all kinds of people. You see a Kamaru Usman, who's the welterweight champion right now, who's a huge proponent of Black Lives Matter, a big supporter of Black Lives Matter. Nobody has a problem with Kamaru Usman. You have Colby Covington, who's like super mega, who's fighting him right now. Nobody has a problem with that. And they also know that it doesn't matter what your political background is, what your political beliefs are. Jo bolna hai bolo, sab karna hai karo. But at the end of the day, things get solved in the cage. And that's what they're really worried about. So Dana knows his audience. The UFC knows who its audience is. And that's why they don't seem to have that much of a problem with these kinds of things.
Not only that, just look at the way mixed martial arts is structured. See, how many people know that Amanda Nunes is from the LGBT community?
Yeah.
Nobody knows that. Very few. It's not even an issue. What I'm trying to say is, I think it's also got to do with the nature of the sport at times.
Yeah.
The nature of the sport when it comes to mixed martial arts is like, remember the Conor and Khabib fight? How did it all start? Khabib mocked Conor's wife, if you remember. Then Conor crossed all lines when he used ridiculous jibes, and then Conor crosses all lines. Anyways, I think Conor has some behavioral issues.
He posted a photo of Khabib's wedding and said, "Your wife's a towel, mate."
Yeah, that's what Conor said. So that's the thing. There is something, and I think sometimes the blame and the credit goes to Dana White, because Dana is the guy who set the sport up the way he wanted to, at least UFC, and they pretty much follow that kind of a model now, and that's how it's been set now in MMA. But again,
from the outside,
it does not transfer to other sports.
Sorry, from the outside, and it looks like the nature of the sport is that you get to beat the crap out of each other, and so each other, it only in
इसका इंटरनेट गया.
गुड बाय, टाटा गया.
इसका भी इंटरनेट अभिजीत अय्यर के इंटरनेट जैसा है. चल, अच्छा एक काम कर,
तब
तक एक क्वेश्चन लेते हैं.
हाँ, क्वेश्चन लेते हैं, चलो.
So what will be done if a woke company owned IPL team has to bend the knee for casteism, abolishing Hindutva, Islamophobia in India?
Yeah. That's I don't think that's such a wild question.
I'm back.
Yeah, now Nikhil, so this question is for both of you. Again, somebody has asked what will be done if a woke company owns...
I had one observation. I think to the sports that you are talking about, which is UFC or MMA, etc., it's these kinds of words, these kind of conflict agitates people, and eventually this sport is about beating the living daylights of each other. It fits, it perfectly fits. You're agitating each other, you go in, you have a fight, and that's how the real notion of the sport is. That's how you decide things, right? Now, if you agitate each other and you cause this kind of slur in cricket, and cricketers start beating each other up, then you've got a problem, right? So cricket has to function differently. In rugby, for example, they function differently. In rugby, if a rugby player so much so steps up to a referee, that's it, you're out, you're ejected, right? So other sports have different sort of contexts. So if footballers are to kick out and lash out at each other, you'd have a problem. So this is why they try to keep it, I think, much more. But overall, I do think that everything in life has suffered a bit because of excessive political correctness. And it looks like you guys have found these safe haven spots where political correctness hasn't sort of totally destroyed all notions of sanity in the way which it has in other places.
Okay, no, so this is a good question now, Nikhil. This is about cricket. What if a company owns an IPL team and they start bending the knee for casteism, abolishing Hindutva, Islamophobia in India, etc.?
I think that BCCI will throw them out.
One would hope. I would hope at least that's what happens.
Well, either the BCCI is going to throw them out, or the Indian government is going to come to the BCCI and say, you know what? You have this status of being a charitable organization. Let's start paying some taxes, boys. Come on.
Yeah. And also, I think if that happens, I think people need to speak up as well. Like, people are speaking up a little bit when it comes to NFL and stuff, because their viewership year by year has been declining. Pichle 3-4 saal mein, their viewership has been declining. And if that kind of shit started happening with the IPL, I think the public will speak.
Very interesting, Sham, because in the context of the Indian team, right? They did what they did, and like I said, it was physically repulsive because it was so insincere, right? It was just like you said, Bapuji, aap mar gaye wala scene tha. It was really, really bad. Yeah, you were looking at these guys.
नहीं ये क्या है? इस क्वेश्चन का आंसर करो. Can a white player take off the knee like Zaha?
Take off
ये क्या है? मेरे को नहीं मालूम.
I think what he means is not take the knee. I think he's talking about the choice thing, right? So that's what happened to Dickok. In football, in European football, by the way, it's a personal choice thing. It's a personal, but you could end up with tensions in the dressing room if you do it, right? So there are various complications to this. But I was just saying, like, the Indian team did what they did, and just to the point that Shambhav was talking about, which is how do people react? They got it from both sides of the political spectrum, boss, properly. One side going like, "Saro tumhe kuch nahi pata," and the other side going like, "Acha, why not for casteism? Why not for this? Why not for that?" Right? So this is, to me, it was the perfect reaction. Because to me, it typified exactly why you shouldn't be venturing into this bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody has said, Sham, it's pretty clear now. ICC has a bigger plan in America. They think they can, and that is the reason. Somebody has asked, can any so-called right-wing government bring their issues at such big platforms? I don't know. Whatever.
Well, that was going to be my question.
Right, it's a good question.
That was going to be my question. What I was wondering in my head while you guys were talking is that I agree that, sports is this kind of escapism. And for me, it 100% is. I want to escape and I want to watch sports and I don't want to think about anything other than the sport that I'm watching. That's how I feel. But let's say in the future, there is like this huge, maybe there's a war between India and Pakistan. Maybe let's say Pakistan ne Kashmir pe chadhai kar di. And there's a war going on and there are human rights violations going on the side of the Pakistani army against the civilian population of Kashmir. If there is a sport, if there's, let's say, a World Cup going on and the Indian team is participating in the World Cup and they want to make any kind of a gesture, whether it's taking the knee, whether it's a black band, whether it's a placard, whatever, to highlight the atrocities being committed by the Pakistani army on the Kashmiri civilians. करना चाहिए कि नहीं करना चाहिए तब क्या बनता है
मेरा आंसर दूं
kind of what I was thinking हाँ
मेरा आंसर बड़ा सिंपल है I hate all of this symbolism in sport whether this symbolism is national anthem, and I'm going to sound very controversial here, I don't like national anthem before sports games either. I am very bored by it.
Only World Cup and only international tournaments. I think it should be allowed.
It can be allowed. They can do what they want to do. I personally
like Olympics and World Cups and things like that. That's it.
Yeah. The short point to the question that Shambhav was raised is this is why all of this is, these are questions to be determined before the match starts, right? So India can turn around and say we won't play with you, right? Or we want them out, or whatever the hell it is, right?
Or I didn't even mean that there's an India-Pakistan match happening. I just meant that there's, let's say, a World Cup match happening and India's playing some other team. In that scenario, the scenario that I laid out for you very explicitly, in that explicit scenario, do you think that the Indian team should have the right to speak up or should be speaking up or doing some kind of
again, I have no problems with these rights to speak. My view is you have to go either all or nothing, right? You can't say that we will allow certain statements, certain symbols, and then go coy on others because you choose that they are not good enough for you. That's the nature of free speech, right? So this is why it's a very dangerous trend. I think in your example, everybody should speak up. To me, that looks black and white. But if you ask a Pakistani, he'll have exactly the opposite answer. He'll say, we are the ones fighting oppression, right? So it's a very dangerous path to go down. Like I keep going back to that. BLM became an easy one because everybody all over the world on that unicultural spectrum, right? So there are white majority countries with large black populations that dominate our sporting psyche in a number of sports.
Yeah.
Right? We watch a lot of them. And particularly for India, it's that beaming down of football more than Colin Kaepernick would have meant nothing to even average city-dwelling kids who like sports and have access until the taking of the knee started with the EPL and with other sort of football tournaments in Europe, right? So it's, in that context, to them, that's a unipolar issue. And it's fine. So they are looking at it, I think, also on that narrow lens that don't go beyond this. Don't really go beyond this. Yeah. America, as usual, will be the one to break, and they will go beyond. I'm quite certain. Like this free Tibet thing has started, somebody else will start something else. They will definitely go beyond. And they're going to see, I think, at some point, like we were discussing, the capitalists will turn around and say, this is going to start affecting returns. And we got to shut this stuff down.
Yep.
And I think that's a fine, perfectly fair way of doing it. The problem with the left is when they exercise liberty, they can't tolerate the other guy exercising liberty. Right? And so in terms of the measure of liberty, the guy with 500 million or $1 billion in his bank account has more liberty than you. Okay? live with that reality. Because he's putting you on the court, he can take you off the bloody court. As simple as that. Right? Money is an existent thing. It's not a non-existent thing. I mean, as much as they'd like to believe that kumbaya is what the world runs on, or should run on. Right? So at some point, I think it'll get chopped down. And it will happen the day they decide conflicting stuff can happen. And that's why I think a lot of sporting teams know, go to the point of X, don't go beyond. If you start going beyond, it's all going to get shut down.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2-3 questions I'm going to take up. I'm going to share my views and maybe you guys can. Somebody asked.
I wanted to make an observation. I'll make it at the end. Qua BLM.
Sure.
Right, so we'll take, but just remind me in case I forget.
Okay. So that could be your closing comments. So somebody has asked, do you think if India would have defeated Pakistan, it wouldn't have become such a big fuss? Anger of defeat got mixed with politics. I think that's a valid observation. I think a little bit of it does add.
I think it's an enhancer. I don't think it would not have been noticed. It's an enhancer, I think. But it would have been noticed.
So somebody has made a comment, apolitical escapism is great, but Kobe will get let's go Brandon cheers for sure. And I really hope he's not fake news.
Did you guys see that Let's Go Brandon is this rap song that was released by this pro-Trump rapper? And here's the kicker. That song is the #1 song in America on iTunes. He beat bloody Adele. That song beat Adele's song. Adele's at #3. Let's Go Brandon is #1, and a remix of Let's Go Brandon is #2 in America.
Which is essentially a dog whistle for fuck Joe Biden.
Yep, that's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, now this question is:
so what news reporter who was listening to the chart to fuck Joe Biden and said, "Listen to them. They're supporting him. They're saying, let's go Brandon.
Let's go Brandon."
Okay, Nikhil, take this one. So what outlet should athletes have to bring attention to issues within sport? There is rampant racism, homophobia, sexual abuse in all sports worldwide.
These are not the first set of athletes bringing attention to anything in the world, man. I mean, what the heck? You just gave the example of Muhammad Ali, did you not? He didn't take it with him to the boxing ring.
Yeah.
Yes.
Martina
Navratilova also.
Martina did so much. He didn't bring it to Wimbledon's courts.
Who was the sprinter in Nazi Germany? The Jesse Owens?
Jesse Owens didn't have much of a voice, right? That was the difference. But I'm trying to say that these are not the first set of athletes that have made any kind of statement anywhere. It's remarkable. You don't have to bring it into the sporting arena. There are infinite arenas available to you. And in fact, the current athletes have more arenas available to them than the ones in the past. And yet the ones in the past used to make telling statements, right? Today, you could get onto your Instagram, you could get onto your Twitter feed, you could get onto anywhere and project and amplify.
Okay, this is a good point. Moeen Ali spoke about Palestine in a match, which he got banned and fined. So ICC said you can't make political statements using the sport. So why is BLM not a political statement, Sham, then? Moeen Ali is, I think, the England team cricket player. He's the off-spinner and left-hand batsman.
Yeah. I mean, it is a political discussion, but like Nikhil said, what the Black Lives Matter organization has been either fortunate with or been very smart with is they've been able to conflate the Black Lives Matter organization with the sentiment that Black lives matter. 99.999% of human beings believe that Black lives matter and Black lives should be considered as sacred as any other life. But what BLM, the organization, has been able to do, he said, ki our organization is the same thing as these people. So now if you speak up against BLM, you're kind of saying that Black lives are not as important to you as other lives. So I think because it's that kind of a touchy subject that nobody really wants to disagree with it. At least nobody who cares about their job or cares about their online reputation really wants to touch it. And that's why I think BLM has generally been able to infiltrate culture, sport, corporations, and all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, but it's an outright,
Palestine
BLM is an outright Marxist movement, right?
Well, that's the thing. They've been very smart about how they've marketed themselves. They're saying if you're against us as an organization, that means you hate Black people. That's what it means, basically.
They are projecting they are Marxist. They're totally capitalistic. They're part of the dark side for sure.
Of course they're capitalists.
Did you see that fantastic interview of one of the leaders of BLM who was asked, in the meantime, you've acquired, hundreds of thousands of dollars and more. And she's like, I'm only acquiring wealth for Black people. My family are Black people. So
I'm Black and I'm acquiring wealth for myself. Yeah.
The white guy does it. He's doing it for himself and for the existing structure. But I'm doing it for good Black folk. Only 4 of them, but for good Black folk.
That's exactly what it is.
But then, Nikhil, again, what about the world banning South Africa from sport due to apartheid? Was it wokeism? Was it necessary? The problem is the lines are so blurry.
I mean, sometimes it's not.
That's the point. You don't get it, right? This is why I'm trying to say there was no sports organization that banned South Africa because they understood these lines are blurry. Right? It was nations that took the step of banning South Africa. And once nations took the step, then sports organizations took the steps. Right? It's a political decision. Let the politicians make the decision. Everybody now wants to step into that domain. Once you step into that domain, you better be ready for the same brickbats that politicians get.
Yeah.
Okay, so your analogy here would be a perfect one. Would be when the government of India decides we are not going to play cricket with Pakistan, and then the BCCI has to comply to the decision of the government of India, right?
Yeah.
Got it. So yeah, I think that's a fair enough assessment. Okay, now Nikhil, because we've already touched an hour and 15-minute mark almost. So what was your point on the BLM bit?
Yeah, so BLM's happened, the knee's been taken, a lot has been done. I still don't, boardrooms in America are still white men, right? Boardrooms in these sporting teams are still white men. The big thing with all this knee taking and everything in the UK was there are no Black football managers. Guess what? There are still no Black football managers, right? This is the reality of it all, right?
Yep.
Look, you enter into the sporting arena at some point in time, everybody gets down to who's going to make me win, right? And I'm telling you right now, in the future, organically, without any of this rubbish to be the wind beneath their so-called wings, Black athletes are going to make excellent football managers.
Yeah,
they're going to make excellent quarterbacks like Michael Vick had until he got into that dogfighting ring. It's another great, it's quintessential Black American story, right? It's the greatest Black, like this guy could have been the GOAT. He could have, he was a running back who was a quarterback. He was the ultimate, right? And what does he have? He has a dogfighting ring in his basement. And he gets arrested and goes to jail. Phenomenal, right? So what I'm going to get at is that you're going to get there anyway because sport privileges power, pace, etc. Black athletes have been better at so many sports than so many other athletes, right? It's going to happen. It's inevitably going to happen. You look at the story of France, right? France, 1998 World Cup, when it began, the World Cup that they won.
Yeah.
There's a lot of grumblings amongst the French public that the black players don't, the immigrant black players don't sing the anthem at all or with the same sort of fervor, right? Because understand in the context of France, Republic is everything. The Republic is everything. Nothing else matters. Your religion doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. The Republic comes first, right? So the anthem's not being sung with that fervor. By the end of it, they'd won the World Cup, and after there was no problem again whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right? Because you proved it through sheer competence. You were that good. Their greatest ever footballer, you can maybe make a case for Michel Platini, but it's probably Zinedine Zidane because of his results at the international arena. Although Platini, we don't know him because we were too young to watch it. Platini was a genius. He was an absolute genius. He was a genius for a longer period of time, more dominant than Zidane was. Right? But Zidane is what we remember because he scored 2 goals in a World Cup final. And in the 2006 World Cup, they may have lost that final on his head part. But that is the singular player performance of 2006 Zidane is the only thing that comes anywhere near Maradona 86. Anywhere near. Right? Maradona 86 is the absolute apogee, right? So this is going to happen by sheer competence anyway. I look at a guy like Marcus Rashford at United. Right? This guy is going to be, if he wants to, he's going to be a heck of a manager. He's going to be a heck of a coach. It's going to happen. So, at that moment, it would really irritate me if BLM turns around and says, this happened because of us. That will really irritate me.
The final point that I would also like to make is that, this kind of wokeism generally tends to be the easy way out. I'm glad Nikhil brought up the point of the black managers and things like that, because see, changing fortunes of black people or solving problems of black people, it actually is going to require a lot of work. Like, take the example of, let's say, a city like Chicago, where you have a record number of black homicides every weekend, pretty much. And people are like, "Arey, iske khilaf kuch karna hai." What's the easy thing to do? You tell me. Is the easier thing to take some very, very, very difficult policy decisions, very difficult law and order decisions, which will ultimately solve the problem or greatly ameliorate the problem 20 years down the line? But you're going to have to face a lot of political brickbats. You might even lose power. Or the easier thing to do is to take the knee and say, ki sale gore bade kharab log hain. What is the easier thing to do? Similarly, in football, when you're trying to, establish more black managers, is the easier thing to, take those steps, actually provide them training opportunities, things like that, put certain measures in place that they get better opportunities? Or is the easier thing to do is ki yaar 2 seconds ke liye before the match, take a knee, say white people bad, problem solved? What is the easier thing to do? So these companies, these leagues, all these sports, they're all taking, all the politicians as well, they're all taking the easy way out by saying, ki yaar, 1 second ke liye ghutne take do, problem solved. Then you don't have to worry about, every weekend. Last weekend in Chicago, 21 people got shot. Around 11 black people got shot and killed. Who the hell gives a shit? Nobody gives a shit because Colin Kaepernick's making a documentary. Kya tension hai?
Fair enough. And the irony of it all is somebody wrote something amazing. It's like, we keep talking about all these symbolisms, but Qatar, despite its horrific human rights record, is going to host the World Cup next year.
Exactly.
I mean, yaar, mazak bana ke rakha hua hai. So that's what it is, right? It is convenient.
In winter, by the way, they're going to disrupt the whole season, everything, just to accommodate them.
Exactly. So that's my whole point, right? Look, this is all nothing but convenient symbolism. And in fact, if you ask me, this is again the concept creep of America spilling over into each and every other country and its life. A lot of countries are just going to say F off to America and American woke capitalism. ICC and BCCI, in their own wisdom, in quotes, thought, भाई चाचा हमको थोड़ा पैसा बनाने को मिलेगा, थोड़ा पैसा बना लो, थोड़ा मैनचेस्टर यूनाइटेड को थोड़ा, तू झुक रहे थोड़ा नीचे, अपना नी को नीचे कर, उधर 1200-1500 करोड़ मिलेगा, तो थोड़ा झुको, देखो ऐसा है. और हमारे, and रही बात, raising the point about this, look, there are problems within sport, we all know that, and there have been enough stories of brave people raising their head and rising up about problems inside the or outside the society. But my whole take on this, and these will be the closing remarks, and we'll shut it out for the day, is this: that this is how I watch sport. I'm not going to tell you how you're going to watch it. I have completely stopped watching pre and post match analysis of every single sport, till the extent that even in mixed martial arts, if it's a live pay-per-view, I mute until the fight starts. I mute the thing and I don't watch it. I don't care. Look, I don't know if Sham remembers this. I was talking to him in one of those days before the show. We were going live and I told him, यार ये कोबी कविंटन और टायरन वुडली का और कोई काम नहीं है. एक अपना टोपा लेके बैठ गया, एक अपना दूसरा टोपा लेके बैठ गया. ओ यार मारो एक दूसरे को, मेरे को तुमको सिर्फ मारते हुए देखना है. मुझे कोई लेना देना नहीं है कि तू ट्रम्प को चाहता है कि तू. यार we are mature people. We can make our political decisions. रही बात, what about, where does Colin Kaepernick go and raise his voice? Baba, he was a known football player, right? He could have played football, made his name through playing football, and he has a social media platform. He could have raised his voice on social media. Nobody was going to stop him there. The problem is when you bring it in the field, you can make your points wherever you go. अभी करते ही है ना हमारे इंडियन क्रिकेट टीम के वो क्या नाम है, रविंद्र जडेजा यूं तलवारें करते रहता है और अपने आप को राजपूत बोलता रहता है. करना भाई, तेरे को किस राजपूत बॉय, राजपूत गर्ल, जो भी जेंडर अपने को करना है कर. Navratilova used to talk about, her being a lesbian and how she's such a hero actually, or whatever usko bulana hai, such an icon, is because she paved the way for, lesbians in sport or homosexuals in general in sport. And these are the icons. Or Muhammad Ali at that time, Nikhil was spot on. He didn't bring it to the boxing ring. Yeah. He took it outside the boxing ring. He used this fame of boxing. So nobody is stopping you as a sports person to do that. But यार स्पोर्ट्स में तो मत लाओ ना. कभी कोई झुक रहा है, फिर कल को कोई कुछ और कर रहा है, परसों कोई और करेगा.
Like I said, it's an escape, man. For most of the people that are watching the sport, it's just an escape from life. It's like watching a movie. It's like going to watch a movie. The movie is an escape from life. अब उस movie के सामने अगर आप बोलोगे कि यार before the movie starts, please take the knee for Black Lives Matter, people will be like, ये क्या बकवास है यार. अब मैं यहाँ पे भी escape नहीं कर सकता. Where the hell do I escape?
But Sham,
exactly, and this is
sport is more than just escape. Huh? Sport becomes so central to people's own existence. Like, I mean, for me, I can't miss a test match, and I cannot miss my weekly Manchester United dose. I can't miss it. I just can't do it.
Yeah, and Arsenal suck, and despite that, I still watch it. I'm in a bloody abusive relationship with them.
I will suffer through those years. I don't care. I have to watch it. I have to watch.
Yeah, I don't know. My personal view is, I've always said, there were few things that would unite us. Sport was one of those things. Actually, sport would unite us because it did not matter what was your religious background, what was your political ideology. We would all come together and enjoy sport and beat each other up for different reasons, not politics or religion. Why did you have to ruin it? I used to hate you for being a supporter of Delhi in IPL, and that was enough for me, but you had to bring politics in it. We'll wrap today's discussion on that note. Nikhil, Sham, pleasure talking to you guys as always. So please go and follow Sham and Nikhil on all social media platforms and support them. And if you like the Cārvāka podcast, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and always remember, the abuses are for Nikhil because he's the Nikhil Mehra. Other than that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.